Barbarian is one of the biggest surprises of 2022, and if you have not watched it yet, go watch it in theaters. Don't watch the rest of this video because I'm going to spoil the crap out of it. Barbarian was directed by Cregger, and it stars Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long. This is a movie that completely caught me off guard. The less you know about it going into it, the crazier it will be. This is a movie you want to see in a big crowd without knowing anything going into it. Trust me, you will be surprised. It's been hard to talk about with people because nobody else has seen it, and again, this is a movie you do not want to spoil. So this video is for me to finally get all my spoiler thoughts out there, because it's been really hard to keep it to myself because no one else that I know at least has seen the movie yet. But again, if you have not seen the movie yet, this is your spoiler warning. Please save this for watch later or whatever. Don't watch this video now. Go see the movie first, especially if you're a horror fan, but definitely go watch the movie first. All right, for real. Spoilers coming in 3, 2, 1. So the initial premise of the movie that's given in the trailers, which also actually didn't give away that much, so you could watch the trailer, but still, I would say avoid it if you can. But in the trailer, you just see this woman arrives at this house that she rented as an Airbnb and finds out that somebody else is staying there. As they keep talking, they realize that the place has been double booked because he got the house under one app and she got it on Airbnb. So whoever owns this house double booked it for this night. But they decide to room together for a little bit until they figure out this whole situation. The big twist of this is that there's a secret hiding under this house, and that secret is that there's this mutant woman under the capturing people, and then there's this man who the true owner of the house. His name is Frank. So from what I understand, he's been kidnapping these women for decades and bringing them down to this dungeon thing, assaulting them. They have kids. He raises the kids, I assume, and then has kids with those kids, and then it just snowballed into the creation of this mutant woman that's like 7 feet tall and big and lanky and has this really creepy monstrous face. And so that's what's been hiding under this house. And so she discovers, Tess, the main character, discovers this as she keeps going down because, again, in the trailer you kind of see it, like the guy that she's staying with disappears down there and she goes to look for him, and then she discovers all the stuff hidden in the basement, the camera in the bedroom, and then she keeps going down further into this dungeon, and it just keeps going from there. Another big thing that surprised me about this movie is how it's actually structured. So you kind of follow this whole situation from, I would say, 3 perspectives, really, which are Tess's, who is the woman who shows up at this Airbnb, and then you have AJ, this actor who apparently owns the house, but I guess he doesn't realize that the real owner is still there. And then you get the perspective of the original owner, Frank. And the way they split it up is that you see Tess's story up to the point where she encounters the monster, and then it cuts, and then it goes straight to AJ's perspective. To me, this is kind of the Bohemian Rhapsody of movies. They kind of keep switching styles throughout the movie, switching character perspectives, somewhat switching tone, but not totally, but it all still feels cohesive. Tess, I'll start with her. I loved her as a character. She was actually a smart horror movie heroine. There's several moments where she thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this, or, oh, I can do this instead. And it's like she's in the audience's mind. I love that. First, when she encounters the secret door in the basement, she just says, nope. And also, when she first goes in the basement, the door closed behind her and she's locked in, and it's not until Keith, the other guy, comes and gets her out. So then the second time when she goes down there to look for Keith, she puts a chair in the door to keep it open so it won't close on her again. Smart. And then later in the movie, when she's escaping the monster, she uses that window that's in the basement and smashes it and crawls her way out of there before the monster grabs her up. Stuff like that I thought was just really well done. Then there's Justin Long playing AJ, who is an absolutely terrible person, and the more he talks and the more you see how he acts, you understand how messed up this guy is. When you first are introduced to him, it's while he's driving. He's an actor, and apparently gets a call that he's being accused of sexual assault by another actress he's working with on the show, so then the show gets canceled, and he's trying to basically fix his life once this happens, and trying to like get his finances in order and get, legal stuff in order. So then we get into sort of the social commentary here because they talk about that stuff. They also talk about back in the Airbnb, Keith and Tess talk about what it's like for women in that kind of situation and how it's harder for them. The world is like a scarier place for them. And so then in this part, it's talking more about the Me Too movement and, believing women and all that kind of stuff, right? So you're following this guy and it's Justin Long. So they picked a very likable actor to play this guy. So at first, like, okay, what's really going on here? And as he keeps talking about the situation, you're like, oh yeah, he definitely did it. There's a scene in a bar where he's talking to his friend about the situation, and the part that really sticks out to me where he keeps saying, when he talks about the sexual experience he had with this woman, he keeps saying, oh, she eventually came around. I'm like, you don't say that about someone you had consensual sex with. So for sure he definitely did it. But then even as the movie keeps going on further down the line, you see more things that prove he's just a terrible person. He's a jerk. But then again, you're still kind of hoping he helps Tess survive through this horror situation. I mean, you don't necessarily want him to survive, but it's still like you feel very conflicted because you can very clearly see he did these horrible things, but at the same time, he's caught up in this crazy situation too. So you're like, do you want him to survive? Do you want him to help? It's like you feel very conflicted. And also on top of that, you have this character being played by Justin Long, who's such a likable person. So I thought that part was done really well too. And then let me go back real quick. I want to mention Bill Skarsgård because he was great in this movie too. His character's actually not in it as much. He's there in the first act, and then he gets brutally murdered within that first part where I was talking about like Tessa's perspective. So he gets murdered pretty quickly. But while he is there, it's really well done because you can see he and Tess are kind of getting along, but she's still kind of nervous because you can't fully trust him. And he does acknowledge that. Like there's a part where he has a wine bottle. I was like, here, I wanted to wait till you came outside so you could see me open it so you know you could trust me. Because at first he tries to give her tea, but she doesn't drink it because, of course, you wouldn't trust tea from a random stranger, right? So he did that. He saw that happen. So he's like, okay, well, maybe if she sees me open this bottle, then she'll trust me. And so they're hanging out and things are actually going well. They have a lot in common. And the first creepy thing that happens in the movie involves him where while Tess is sleeping in the bedroom and Keith is sleeping on the couch. By the way, Tess didn't lock the door the first time she goes in there, but then after the creepy thing happens, she does lock it. So again, she's a very smart horror character. But while she's sleeping in the bedroom, the door creaks open, and I have to assume that it's the mother, which I think is the name of the creature. It was coming in her room and then heard something and then dipped, right? So then she looks over and sees Keith on the couch kind of like having sort of a nightmare or something, and she wakes him up and he's like, whoa, what are you doing? And he's like all freaked out because she's like, he thinks that this stranger is doing something, which is kind of ironic because she thought that was kind of what was going to happen to her. And little things like that I thought were really well done, very smartly written. And then speaking of the writing, everything tracks really well. I have to watch the movie again to know for sure, but I think based on the first watch, I would say everything connected really well. In the movie, there's this unhoused character who's in this neighborhood, because also I forgot to mention, the house that they're staying in, the house of the movie, is the only livable house in this abandoned neighborhood, which I also think is, when it goes back to like social commentary, I think it's sort of a play on the phrase, there goes the neighborhood, right? Because typically that phrase was meant for when people of color moved in somewhere, but then in this situation, they mentioned in one of the flashbacks that Frank was one of the last people to be living in this neighborhood and everybody else seemed to be moving out. And I think I'd have to assume that as this creature, the mother, became more well known, everybody's like, either we're going to get out of here or she killed them all. That part's not really clear, but I would have to assume one of those two things happened. That either people saw what was going on and dipped, or she did in fact go out and murder people, because the guy, I forgot his name, but there's the unhoused guy who's hanging around the neighborhood still. He mentioned that she only comes out at night. So I'd have to assume that either she was going out at night, murking people, or people started hearing about that and said, we're not staying here, and they dipped out ASAP. So let's talk about Frank. Frank is the man, the original owner of the house, and I guess the father of the mother, the creature that we see in the dungeons of the house. The third act shows his backstory sort of and what he was doing with the house. You see him going to a convenience store to get stuff for an at-home birth, and we'd have to assume that this is one of his victims that is giving birth to his child that is in that dungeon room downstairs. And the lady's helping him, and he's getting tarp, and he mentions that he didn't want to go to a hospital, all this stuff. But one shot that I thought was really cool, and I also have to talk about cinematography, but the one shot that was really cool is as he was leaving the place and he gets in his car, he starts following another woman, and so you see the camera in the car with him, and it's sort of framed by the edge of the car on this side, and then him there watching the person, and then your focus is on the car and the woman in the back, and you see it kind of follow them, track them across, and he ends up at her house. He puts on a fake repairman uniform, goes in to say he's checking something, there's some outage in the area. As he's in this woman's house, you see him go inside the bathroom and unlock the window, so you'd have to assume that's how he gets in to later kidnap her. That's something I really love about this movie, is it does a lot of showing and not necessarily telling. They do explain things later on in the movie, but for a long while, you're just kind of going along for the ride and picking up context clues along the way, but for the most part, you sort of have to figure things out until they eventually tell you. So then as you finish watching this movie, you think, okay, well, where was the barbarian? Because when I think of the word barbarian, I'm thinking more, I guess, of the noun, like a big brute, like Dave the Barbarian from Disney Channel, if you remember that, or like, big Viking guys like what we saw in the Northmen, right? So actually, as a noun, the definition of barbarian, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a person from an alien land, culture, or group believed to be inferior, uncivilized, or violent, which pretty much describes the mother and Frank, especially. I think it's more so Frank that this movie is referring to, what this title is, or a barbarous person, a rude, crude, uneducated, or uncivilized person. So I think that is kind of speaking more to what Frank was doing. I don't think I would call the mother or that creature the Barbarian of the movie. I think it's more so just a comment on the whole situation and the savagery of it, of what he was doing, kidnapping these women, forcing them to have his children, and so on and so forth. I think that's a big part of it. Also, speaking of the mother, something that stood out to me is it kind of reminded me of X earlier this year, where we had Pearl, spoiler alert, we had Pearl, who you could see had this complicated relationship, who was yearning for sex with her husband, who feels, I guess, unwanted and stuff. And even though you see her going around killing all these people and stuff, you do feel sorry for her because you see that she's definitely missing something. And I kind of got a little bit of that from the mother in this movie, especially towards the end when you see her save Tess and then Tess has to kill her. But you see, like, she has a soft spot for Tess. And I think based on what we see in her bedroom of sorts, where she has that video of the breastfeeding and stuff, I think you see that she sort of has this kind of yearning to be a mother. And I guess that's why I call her the mother, because she just wants babies of her own. She tries to make Tess and AJ her babies. And so in that way, you do feel bad for her, because also she didn't ask to be there. I mean, she is a violent monster, I guess, but she did not ask to be there. She is also sort of a victim of what Frank was doing. Part of you does feel bad for her, but at the same time, you have to think, well, she is killing a bunch of people savagely, so it's very, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you do sympathize with her to some degree as you keep watching the movie and you learn more about that backstory. And then in general, I just want to talk about the comedy. Some of the funniest parts for me were Tess opening the door for the first time saying nope. And then AJ, who tries to sell the house because, again, he's in legal trouble and needs to kind of get his finances in order. He's looking at selling this house, and when he discovers the creepy dungeon, he doesn't think, oh, this is scary, I should not go in here. He thinks, oh, wait a minute, I can add this as square footage for my sale, for my real estate thing. And so he goes around measuring the creepy dungeon with his measuring tape. And when he gets down to like the deep dungeon part and he's looking, he finds the bedroom with the creepy breastfeeding video and stuff. He then sees like his tape getting pulled, and then the creature finds him and throws him down that dungeon. That part was all hilarious. And then when the mother tries to feed them her with the bottle, Tess like, drink from the bottle. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. No, he just keeps denying it. And so then the mother yanks him up from out of there and like tries to breastfeed him in the room. That stuff was just hilarious. Justin Long, I think, was a perfect actor for this because he's great with both horror and comedy. And also another part for me that was really funny was when they were talking, Tess and AJ, once they escaped, they're talking to the unhoused guy that's living in the neighborhood, and he's explaining, oh yeah, she never comes in here. I've been here for 15 years, and she's never coming up in this mother. And then as soon as he says that, the mother comes slamming through the wall like Kool-Aid Man and takes him, rips his arm off, and beats him with it. I was like, what is going on? This movie was just crazy. And last thing I mentioned, the cinematography. This movie was shot so beautifully. One of my favorite shots that they kept doing was this close-up wide angle. It specifically did it with Justin Long when he was going around the tunnel with a gun. I love those kind of shots. I love the tracking shots, especially the one, like I mentioned, with Frank following that woman. I also like when it goes from the more modern look to the vintage look, when it changes between time periods, right? Because it goes from modern day to, I think it was like the 50s or the 60s, when you see Frank's backstory. I thought that was done really well. Honestly, this is one of my favorite movies to see on the big screen for sure. As you can tell, I really loved it. If you've seen it, let me know what your spoiler thoughts are down below, because this is an open spoiler space. Also, I will say, please go support movies like this. People on Twitter are always complaining about how there's always so much reboots, sequels, prequels, superhero movies, MCU, DC, whatever, and not enough original movies. But then when there are original movies, they don't go out and support them. That doesn't make sense. If you want to see more original movies in theaters, then you need to go see those original movies when they are in theaters, because that's when they pay attention. Nowadays, if an original movie does not make a lot of money, then they think that we don't want to see more of that, and so then they go and make more sequels, reboots, and prequels. So again, if you want to see more movies like this, support them while they are in theaters. So let me know what your spoiler thoughts are down below in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you when I see you.